Lightning cracked across the charcoal sky, the night Amelia found herself trembling behind the wheel of an aging sedan, a single suitcase tossed haphazardly in the back seat. She was 5 months pregnant, carrying the child of a man she once believed to be her soulmate. Yet Ethan Harrington, the revered millionaire who built his empire from the ground up, had locked her out of the only home she had ever known. Why? So he could parade a diamond-draped mistress in front of the entire world. Fate had seemingly abandoned Amelia, or so she thought. For in the shadows lay a single letter destined to unravel everything and force destiny's final reckoning. Amelia Johnson first met Ethan Harrington in a quiet corner of Manhattan where dreams soared as high as the skyscrapers and heartbreak lurked in every alleyway. She was 22 at the time, a recent graduate from a small liberal arts college in upstate New York, armed with a degree in literature that her parents once worried might never pay the bills. Nevertheless, Amelia had a heart brimming with optimism and a mind teeming with stories waiting to be told. Ethan, older by a decade, was already something of a legend in local business circles. He had a gift for seeing hidden potential, whether in failing companies or in an introverted girl quietly sipping espresso in a crowded cafe. At the time, his successes included a lucrative tech startup he'd sold for millions. Rumor had it, he was set on building a new conglomerate, an empire that spanned real estate, fashion, and digital media. The day they met, Amelia was sitting in a narrow booth at Bellamy's coffee shop, her laptop open, attempting to finish a short story for a modest online publication. She never intended to catch anyone's attention, especially not that of Ethan Harrington, who was rumored to have the arrogance of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. Yet to her surprise, he asked if he could join her. That chance conversation sparked something that would eventually grow into a raging inferno, a consuming love that Amelia believed was her fairy tale. From the outside, they looked like a mismatched pair, Amelia the quiet girl with honey-brown hair and wide, curious eyes hunched over her laptop. Ethan the confident entrepreneur who strolled around like he owned the city. But from that very first meeting, there was a tenderness in Ethan's voice that melted Amelia's defenses. He spoke passionately about ideas, his desire to transform the old neighborhoods of Brooklyn into something modern, yet preserving the soul of the city. She in turn told him about her writing her dreams of penning a novel that would one day grace bookstore windows. It didn't take long for him to sweep her off her feet. Expensive dinners at high-rise restaurants, strolls along the Hudson River, and stolen kisses under neon streetlights made every moment feel as if they were the only two people in Manhattan. Friends thought they were moving fast, but Amelia felt for the first time that she was truly living. And in Ethan she saw both a fierce intellect and a complicated soul. She admired how he possessed an uncanny ability to seal million-dollar deals by day, then listen intently to her short story drafts by night. There was an unspoken promise in every gentle touch, one of forever. Her parents, George and Laura Johnson, worried that a man of Ethan's stature might break Amelia's heart. "He's built a kingdom," her mother often said, "and men who build kingdoms sometimes act like kings." But Amelia dismissed those concerns. She saw only the man who doted on her, who funded her creative writing workshops, without her even asking, who recommended her to some of his publishing contacts. He claimed to believe in her talent more than she believed in it herself. They married in a lavish ceremony at the Harrington estate in the Hamptons. Pictures splashed across society columns. The tech mogul weds. The budding writer. 1,000 white orchids framed the altar, and Amelia's ivory train swept across the polished marble. That day her heart fluttered with undiluted hope, convinced that the euphoria of their union would never fade. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Their married life began in an opulent penthouse overlooking Central Park. Morning sunshine spilled in through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting their living room in a warm golden glow. At first, Amelia's days were filled with creative inspiration. She had a dedicated writing alcove designed by Ethan himself, complete with custom-built bookshelves and a vintage reading lamp that once belonged to a famous editor. Meanwhile, Ethan spent his days strategizing how to expand his empire. Despite the hustle, he never failed to remind Amelia of how much he loved her. There were surprise breakfasts in bed, diamond bracelets left on her writing desk, and spontaneous getaways to tropical islands when he concluded major deals. When they visited the Harrington family's old countryside estate, Ethan's father, Christopher Harrington, made it clear that he too was glad Ethan had finally found someone with a kind heart. However, as months turned to years, subtle changes began creeping in. Ethan's business expansions demanded longer hours. He started jetting off more frequently, traveling to Singapore, London, Dubai, seemingly every major financial hub. His phone buzzed incessantly, even late at night, and Amelia often fell asleep alone, the blankets on his side untouched. She grew accustomed to waking up to hurried goodbyes and stiff business suits. At first, Amelia consoled herself that this was the price of success, that every entrepreneur's spouse navigated this tension. She reminded herself of her own busy schedule whenever she was deep in her writing. Yet there was an ache she couldn't define. The connection she cherished, the stolen moments in coffee shops, the gentle discussions of art and life, had begun to fade. She realized they rarely had time to just sit in the same room and talk. Ethan, for his part, seemed stressed. Yes, he was building unstoppable momentum in business circles, but it came with a sharper edge. His staff whispered about him becoming a merciless negotiator, a man who would crush smaller competitors without a second thought. At times, Amelia glimpsed a colder side of him, a steely determination that excluded warmth. She tried to talk to him about it, especially on nights when he slumped into bed, looking defeated. But he'd wave off her concerns with a curt, "I'm fine, just tired." It was during this period of subtle distance that Amelia learned she was pregnant. After 3 years of marriage, the news was exhilarating for her. She had always dreamed of becoming a mother. Nervous and excited, she prepared a small celebration in their penthouse. She cooked Ethan's favorite meal, spaghetti carbonara with extra parmesan, and left the pregnancy test on the table as a surprise. Yet when Ethan arrived home past midnight, the dinner was cold and Amelia was dozing on the couch. He barely glanced at the test before giving her a distracted peck on the forehead. "That's great, sweetheart. We'll talk about it tomorrow," he muttered. Then he trudged off to their bedroom, leaving Amelia by the flickering candles, heartbreak simmering beneath her chest. The next morning, Ethan apologized for his indifference. "I'm sorry I was exhausted. Of course I'm happy we've always wanted a child." He kissed her cheek. "You have to understand, I'm in the middle of the biggest deal of my life. A child is wonderful news, but we need to approach it carefully. Let me focus on securing the next round of funding, and we'll think about all the baby details soon." Amelia forced a bright smile, reassuring him that she understood. But in truth, anxiety coiled inside her. She feared that the child would be an afterthought in a life consumed by business ventures. Yet she clung to hope. Perhaps once the baby arrived, it would reinvigorate their bond. Maybe Ethan would see that there was more to life than deals and expansions, and so she carried on quietly nurturing new life within her, trusting that the marriage she had believed unbreakable would remain so. Little did she know the stage was already set for a new figure to enter Ethan's world, someone who would challenge everything Amelia held dear. The first time Amelia heard the name Bianca Rossi was from one of Ethan's junior associates, Michael Thompson. Michael was an earnest man who'd always been discreet, but he looked uneasy when he mentioned Bianca. "She's a consultant from Milan," he stammered during a hurried phone call with Amelia. Ethan brought her on to work on some European real estate expansions. "Is that all?" Amelia asked, sensing Michael's reluctance to elaborate. "Yeah, sure," Michael replied, but his hesitance spoke volumes. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became increasingly scarce at home. He mentioned that Bianca was brilliant, a rising star with a keen eye for international markets. Amelia tried to be supportive. After all, it wasn't strange for a business tycoon to hire foreign experts. Still, there was something about the name that pricked at her heart. One evening, Amelia decided to drop by Harrington Enterprises headquarters to bring Ethan a late dinner. She reasoned that it would be a small gesture to show that she cared about his grueling work schedule. She stepped off the private elevator and was greeted by hushed voices in an adjacent conference room. Through the glass partition, she saw a woman with glossy raven hair, a striking silhouette and impeccable fashion sense. Bianca Rossi. She stood too close to Ethan. A manicured hand casually resting on his shoulder as they laughed over something on his laptop screen. Amelia swallowed hard. She chided herself for jumping to conclusions. Surely it was just a collaborative moment between colleagues. But the images stuck with her as she handed Ethan the neatly wrapped dinner in his office. He barely acknowledged her gesture. He was polite, but distant, scanning his phone for messages, even as she explained she'd made his favorite dish. A week later, paparazzi photos surfaced on a gossip blog, Ethan and Bianca stepping out of a swanky midtown lounge after midnight. Their heads were bent together conspiratorially. Headlines speculated about the nature of their relationship, fueling rumors that the Ice King of Manhattan might be melting for someone who wasn't his wife. Amelia's heart pounded as she scrolled through the images. She tried calling Ethan to confront him, but he didn't pick up, responding instead with a terse text. "I'm in a meeting. We'll talk later." When he finally came home, almost 2 days later, Amelia pressed him about the gossip. Ethan's voice was defensive, but not remorseful. "Bianca's an important asset to the company. Yes, we occasionally meet after hours to discuss deals. That lounge was hosting a networking event. It's purely business." He slammed a stack of paperwork onto a table. "Why are you listening to rumors?" She tried to protest that the photos were more than rumors. "People don't usually lean that close for purely professional reasons," she said, her voice trembling. But Ethan dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. He glowered at her as though she were a child, complaining about boogeymen under the bed. Hurt and frustrated, Amelia retreated to her writing alcove, tears burning her eyes. That night, sleep eluded her. She rummaged through the kitchen for comfort food, but found none, as though the entire house was devoid of warmth. She found herself turning to old letters Ethan had written early in their marriage, beautifully poetic messages about how he'd cross oceans just to see her smile. She wondered how that sweet man had turned into this cold figure. Yet she refused to lose hope. She was pregnant with their child. She wanted to believe they could salvage their relationship. But in the days that followed, Ethan's mood only darkened and Bianca's presence grew more visible. Public events industry gatherings, even front-page spreads in business magazines. Bianca was always by Ethan's side, impeccably dressed, elegant and fiercely confident. The gossip lines began referring to Bianca as Ethan Harrington's secret weapon. Amelia felt increasingly like a spectre in her own marriage. Her parents urged her to consider a separation, but Amelia couldn't fathom raising her unborn child alone. She told herself, "I vowed to stand by him in sickness and in health." Maybe this is the sickness part, a sickness of the heart. She resolved to give him one more chance to come clean, to choose his family over his ambition. Little did she know, the confrontation that awaited her would leave her homeless, destitute, and questioning whether she ever truly knew the man she married. Amelia's breaking point came on a balmy summer evening. She had reached her 6th month of pregnancy, her belly now unmistakably round. She still tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, attending prenatal checkups, reading baby books, and preparing the penthouse for the child she still prayed Ethan would embrace. One night she decided to confront him directly, face to face, without anger or accusations. She wanted them to speak candidly, to air out the tension and begin rebuilding. She planned a simple dinner, lighting fragrant candles reminiscent of their early romance. At first, Ethan didn't come home at his usual time, so she texted him, "We need to talk. Please come back soon." To her relief, Ethan arrived, but he wasn't alone. Bianca Rossi strode in behind him, her heels clacking against the polished floor. The moment Amelia saw her stepping into the penthouse, their home, her heart dropped. "What is she doing here?" Amelia asked, her voice unsteady. Ethan dismissed her concern with an airy gesture. "We have business to finalize. Her hotel was overbooked, so I said she could stay in the guest room." Anger flared in Amelia's chest like a volcanic eruption. "And you thought it was appropriate to bring her here without even telling me first. This is our home, Ethan." Bianca flicked her eyes around the apartment, obviously appraising the decor, the furniture, the artwork. In that moment, Amelia felt like a stranger in her own life. Ethan sighed. "Amelia, we're busy. I'm not going to pay for a suite last minute when we have space here." Fury mingled with sorrow. The carefully prepared dinner sat on the table, the candles flickering ominously. With trembling hands, Amelia threw her napkin onto her plate, spattering sauce across the white tablecloth. "You claim it's all business, but do you have any idea what this looks like? The rumors, the pictures, the way you've been ignoring me." Bianca cleared her throat, stepping closer to Ethan as though to defend him. Amelia felt an invisible line being crossed. "Mrs. Harrington," Bianca said smoothly, "Ethan and I respect you, but we're professionals and we stop." Amelia cut her off. "I'm talking to my husband. You stay out of this." For the first time, a flicker of guilt passed across Ethan's face. But it was fleeting. His brow hardened. "You're overreacting. Bianca is an integral part of my European expansion. Don't embarrass us by being insecure." His words sliced through Amelia's hope like a blade. Amelia stared at him, tears threatening to overflow. "I'm 6 months pregnant, Ethan. You're never here. You dismiss me every time I mention our future. And now, you bring her into our home. I'm not being insecure. I'm being realistic about what's happening right before my eyes." Ethan's expression turned glacial. "Then maybe you need to leave if you can't handle how I run my business." "Are you throwing me out of my own home?" Amelia asked, incredulity sharpening her voice. "It's my property," Ethan snapped. "All of it is in my name. If you're going to cause a scene, maybe you should go cool off somewhere else." The shock nearly stole Amelia's breath. This was a man she had trusted with her life. Feeling her heart hammering, she grabbed a small duffel bag from the closet and began stuffing it with essentials. Her tears came in hot, humiliating waves, but she refused to let them see her crumble completely. She paused by the door, turning back to Ethan one last time. "I'm pregnant with your child," she whispered. "Does that mean anything to you?" He offered only stony silence. Bianca folded her arms, her eyes assessing Amelia with detached curiosity. It was as if Amelia was an inconvenience in her own marriage. Without another word, Amelia left the burn of betrayal scorching her every step. That night she drove aimlessly through the city, unsure of where to go. She tried calling friends, but it was late. Most were asleep or didn't pick up. In her desperation, she found an empty parking lot near a 24-hour diner. She reclined the driver's seat and surrendered to tears. The penthouse in the clouds now felt like a distant dream. There in the cramped car, she was alone, displaced, pregnant, and terrified of what lay ahead. The first night in the car was the hardest. Amelia cried until her eyes were raw, the baby kicking restlessly within her. At sunrise, she awakened to the sounds of passing trucks and the lingering smell of grease from the diner's kitchen. She realized she had no plan, very little cash, and only a tank half full of gas. Her immediate thought was to reach out to her parents. But George and Laura Johnson were retired and lived on a modest pension in Florida. They had warned her about Ethan. She felt too proud, too ashamed to call them. Instead, she resolved to figure things out on her own. With her phone battery waning, she scrolled through her contacts and called Elizabeth Chamberlain, an old friend from college who lived across the river in Brooklyn. "Elizabeth first. I don't know where else to go," she confessed, trying to steady her voice. Elizabeth, hearing the distress in Amelia's tone, immediately offered her spare couch. Amelia felt a flicker of hope. Yet she hesitated. Elizabeth lived in a one-bedroom apartment with her partner, and Amelia didn't want to impose for too long, especially pregnant. Still, it was better than sleeping in a car. They agreed to meet later that day. For now, Amelia took what little money she had and went into the diner to buy a cheap breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. Her reflection in the napkin dispenser startled her pale cheeks, red eyes, and hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in days. In that moment, she felt utterly broken. But she also felt a surge of determination for the sake of her unborn child. She had to be strong. She spent a few nights on Elizabeth's couch. She tried texting Ethan, not out of desperation for him, but in concern for the baby's future. No response. She called Harrington Enterprises, but the receptionist politely informed her that Mr. Harrington was unavailable. Through some social media posts, she discovered Ethan had flown to Europe. Photos showed him and Bianca at a business conference in Paris, the two of them smiling brightly for the cameras. The knife twisted deeper into her heart. Amelia decided to see an attorney, Frederick Johnson, who specialized in family law. A friend of Elizabeth's recommended him. In a small, dimly lit office, she poured out her story from the sudden eviction to the pregnancy. Frederick listened sympathetically. "He can't just throw you out like that," Frederick said firmly. "Legally, you have marital rights. And given your pregnancy, the court will strongly favor your interests if you pursue spousal support." Yet Amelia feared the cost of a prolonged legal battle. Ethan's wealth gave him power and influence. She had only a few dollars left in her personal bank account. Frederick understood her predicament. "We can file an emergency petition for support, but you'll need some upfront funds to cover initial filing fees and attorney's fees." Overwhelmed, Amelia left the office feeling trapped. She was sleeping on a friend's couch, jobless and pregnant. She had no illusions that Ethan, who was flaunting Bianca publicly, would suddenly capitulate to a legal demand. She also feared the emotional toll a public battle would take on her. Instead, she decided to try one more approach meeting with Ethan's father, Christopher Harrington. Christopher was once a towering figure in Ethan's life, a strong-willed man who believed in family above all else. Amelia hoped that if she told him what had happened, he might intervene. She dialed Christopher's private number and left a voicemail explaining the situation in as calm a tone as she could manage. A week passed. No return call. During that time, Elizabeth's small apartment was becoming crowded, and Amelia sensed she was overstaying her welcome. Elizabeth never said so, but Amelia felt guilty. So one chilly morning she returned to the only other shelter she had, her car. She gathered blankets and pillows, then parked near a safe residential area. People walking their dogs occasionally threw curious glances, but no one bothered her. Despite the heartbreak, she clung to the child growing inside her. She would talk to the baby, whispering promises that she would find a way to create a safe, loving environment. Every day felt like an uphill battle. She scoured job listings, applied to freelance writing gigs online, and visited second-hand stores looking for cheap baby items. The fact that she had to consider living in a car while pregnant was a reality that struck her with devastating clarity. Little did she know that a lifeline, an unexpected letter, was already in transit, a ticking time bomb that would shift the power dynamic in ways no one could have predicted. 2 weeks had passed since Amelia moved back into her car. The nights were growing colder, and her pregnancy was entering the 3rd trimester. Every time the baby shifted inside her, it brought a surge of maternal protectiveness. She refused to believe that this was the life she and her child deserved, a mother sleeping in a cramped vehicle while the father was gallivanting across Europe with another woman. Then, on a drizzly afternoon, Amelia received a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. Tentatively, she answered. It was a law firm in Manhattan. Ms. Harrington, this is Megan Reyes from Parker & White. We have a document addressed to you from Christopher Harrington, delivered via courier. May I confirm a mailing address? Amelia's pulse quickened. She had to scramble for a place where she could reliably receive mail. She decided on Elizabeth's address. The woman on the phone asked her to come in person if possible, since the document was marked as urgent. With a jolt of renewed energy, Amelia agreed. The next day she dressed in her cleanest clothes, an old maternity dress that still fit, and took a train into Manhattan. Despite her precarious situation, stepping back into the bustling city felt like stepping onto a stage she used to dominate, if only in the glow of her husband's success. At the law firm's reception, a neatly dressed paralegal handed her a thick, sealed envelope. Mr. Christopher Harrington requested we give this to you. Our understanding is that it's quite important. If you have any questions after reading it, don't hesitate to contact our office. Heart pounding, Amelia thanked her and retreated to a nearby cafe. She ordered a small tea and sat in a corner booth, carefully tearing open the envelope. Inside she found several pages, a letter handwritten by Christopher Harrington, and attached to it a formal legal document. She scanned the letter first. Dearest Amelia, I've learned of your unfortunate circumstances. Ethan has dishonored our family and his obligations to you. I want you to know I was unaware of his actions until recently. I'm deeply sorry. I always considered you a daughter to me. Before his passing, my father, Patrick Harrington, established a trust meant to safeguard the future of any legitimate heirs in our family. I have added an addendum to this trust, legally guaranteeing specific rights to you and your child. Ethan may believe everything is in his name, but our family's estate carries weight beyond his personal empire. Enclosed you will find the official documents. Please do not hesitate to use them. I have already instructed my attorneys to stand by you if you decide to act on your rights. Ethan may have built his fortune, but he has no power to override this trust set in place by his grandfather. Yours sincerely, Christopher Harrington. Amelia's eyes widened in disbelief. She flipped to the legal documents which detailed how the Harrington family trust was structured. It specified that any grandchild of Patrick Harrington, Ethan included, would need to abide by certain moral stipulations to retain control of the estate. In the event of marital disputes, if a child was on the way, the spouse here, Amelia, could assert a claim to the trust's disbursements to ensure the well-being of the heir. Christopher had made an additional clause, naming Amelia as a beneficiary, directly ensuring that if Ethan violated the terms of their marriage, Amelia would have a powerful claim. Her hands trembled. Suddenly, a surge of conflicting emotions welled inside her relief. Gratitude, but also anger. Anger that Ethan had left her destitute, possibly assuming his power was absolute, when in reality his father had the foresight to protect Amelia's future. She reread the letter multiple times, tears forming in her eyes. This was the lifeline she desperately needed. But she also realized the magnitude of the decision before her. Using this trust would ignite a legal firestorm. Ethan would see it as a direct challenge to his empire. She recalled Frederick Johnson's warning about the cost of legal battles. Perhaps with Christopher's backing, she wouldn't be alone. She carefully tucked the documents into her bag, her mind swirling with possibilities. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. She saw a path to regaining her dignity, ensuring her child would never again be forced to sleep in a car. Yet she couldn't shake the nervous anticipation. Facing Ethan would require more than just legal documents. She would need the emotional fortitude to stand up to a man she once adored, a man who still had the power to break her heart with just one look. But for the sake of her unborn child, she vowed to do whatever it took. Armed with Christopher's letter and the legal documents, Amelia arranged an urgent meeting with Frederick Johnson. She felt a surge of empowerment, stepping into his office, a far cry from her previous visit, when despair weighed her down. Frederick's eyes widened as he flipped through the paperwork. This trust is solid ironclad, really. Patrick Harrington set it up decades ago to protect future generations. Christopher's addendum seals the deal for you. You can legally claim spousal support, living expenses, and even a portion of the family estate. If Ethan contests this in court, he'll face an uphill battle. Amelia felt tears of relief. So you're saying he can't just ignore me? Frederick nodded. Exactly. And based on the terms, if Ethan doesn't comply, he risks forfeiting a significant chunk of his inheritance and future claims. That's the last thing he wants. With newfound determination, Amelia gave Frederick the green light to file a formal claim. She couldn't return to living in her car, especially with her due date inching closer. Frederick drafted a letter to Ethan and Harrington Enterprises, a copy to Christopher Harrington, and an additional filing for the family court. The gist was clear. Amelia sought immediate financial support and housing in line with the Harrington Trust. News traveled quickly through the corporate grapevine. Within days, Ethan called. Amelia's heart pounded when she saw his name flash on her phone. She let it ring a few times, steadying her nerves before finally picking up. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Ethan growled. "Defending myself and our child," Amelia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She clutched the phone tightly. "You had no right to drag my father into this. I didn't drag him into anything. He reached out to me, Ethan. He knows what you did, and he's not going to let you ruin me or your child." Silence crackled over the line, thick with tension. "This is a private matter. You want to bankrupt me with lawyers. Fine. But don't forget, I have more resources than you can fathom. Amelia mustered a courage she'd never felt before. "I don't want your money, Ethan. I want security for our baby, and a roof over my head. You left me with no other choice." She hung up before he could respond. Emotion flooded her, but she felt a sense of triumph for standing up to him. Frederick assured her that legally, Ethan would have little room to maneuver. If he tried to intimidate her or withhold financial assistance, the courts would rule in her favor. Days later, she got a surprising phone call from Christopher himself. "Amelia, my dear, I'm so sorry for everything you've endured," he said in a weary voice. He offered her a place in his countryside estate, but she hesitated. She wasn't sure if she wanted to live under the same roof as the Harrington patriarch, even if he was supportive. However, Christopher insisted it was large enough to offer privacy and comfort. "Think of it as a temporary solution until the legalities are sorted," he suggested. Reluctantly, Amelia agreed. Within a week, she was on a train, heading to the Harrington countryside estate. A sprawling mansion set amidst rolling green hills. The estate's caretaker, Edward Carlyle, greeted her warmly and showed her to a cozy suite. It felt surreal to step into such luxury after weeks sleeping in a car and crashing on couches. She was grateful, but her nerves jangled at the idea of crossing paths with Ethan. Christopher was there, looking older than Amelia remembered, his hair thinning and shoulders stooped. He embraced her, gently, tears in his eyes. "I never wanted this, dear. Ethan's lost his way. You have my full support." Yet every corner of the mansion reminded Amelia of the Harrington name of the man she once believed was her forever. The nights were restless, haunted by memories of their early romance. She tried focusing on the future, on the baby, on the glimmer of justice the documents promised. Soon enough, Ethan would have to face reality. The trust demanded it, and so did she. Little did Amelia know, Ethan and Bianca were already concocting a plan to deflect her legal claims to preserve their own interests in the Harrington Empire. The battle lines were drawn, and the stage was set for a confrontation that could fracture the Harrington legacy once and for all. Amelia's first morning at the Harrington countryside estate was a mixture of eerie calm and underlying tension. She awakened to bird song drifting through the open windows and a gentle knock at the door from one of the estate's housekeepers who brought breakfast on a silver tray. Just weeks ago, Amelia had been scrounging for cheap diner meals and dozing fitfully in her sedan. Now she was surrounded by luxury and worry in equal measure. Christopher was nowhere to be seen at breakfast. The caretaker, Edward Carlyle, explained that Christopher had early business to attend to in town. Amelia tried to stay busy, exploring the vast gardens, writing in her journal, and crocheting small baby booties. She told herself this was temporary, that the estate was merely a haven until her legal situation was stable. Late that afternoon, a black SUV barreled up the gravel driveway, stirring dust into the air. Amelia watched from her bedroom window, her heart lurching when Ethan stepped out, phone pressed to his ear. Beside him was Bianca, clad in designer sunglasses. Even from a distance, Amelia felt the sharp sting of betrayal. A short while later, a housekeeper approached Amelia. "Mr. Harrington would like to speak with you in the drawing room." "Which Mr. Harrington?" Amelia asked, apprehension knotting her stomach. The housekeeper paused, uncertain. "Both, ma'am." The drawing room was an elegant space lined with antique bookshelves and accented by gilded mouldings. Christopher sat in a high-backed chair, his expression somber. Ethan stood behind him, posture rigid, eyes narrowed, while Bianca hovered near the doorway, arms crossed defiantly. Christopher rose, offering Amelia a paternal nod. "Amelia, please have a seat. We need to discuss the situation. She settled on a velvet couch opposite them, carefully resting a protective hand over her belly. Ethan cut in before Christopher could speak. "You're leveraging my family's trust against me," he said, voice clipped. "It's manipulative, unnecessary. We could have handled this quietly." Amelia's cheeks burned. "You left me homeless," she said, with as much calm as she could muster. "Don't lecture me about being manipulative." Bianca cleared her throat, stepping forward. "Ethan never intended to make you homeless. It was your decision to leave." Heat flared in Amelia's chest. "Decision. I was practically told to get out." "You moved in behind me." Christopher held up a hand for silence. "Enough. This feud has gone too far. Amelia, you have every right to invoke the trust, and Ethan, I won't allow you to disregard it. Your grandfather set those conditions for a reason." Ethan sneered, turning his gaze to his father. "What about my own rights, father? My marriage is over. Let's be honest. Amelia's making claims for money she doesn't deserve." At that, Christopher's eyes flared with a rare anger. "Don't you dare speak of her that way. She's carrying your child. That child is a Harrington heir, and I will not see my grandchild born into poverty because of your recklessness." A tense silence ensued. Amelia felt her pulse pounding. She'd never expected Christopher to rise so strongly to her defense. She had no illusions that Ethan would suddenly repent. But this was a start. Bianca stepped toward Christopher. "With all due respect, Mr. Harrington, Ethan has legitimate business concerns. You can't force him to pour his personal assets into a failed marriage." Christopher's gaze was icy. "My father's trust trumps any personal preference. If Ethan fails to comply, the trust reverts significant assets to Amelia and the child. I suggest you both think very carefully before continuing this course." Ethan's nostrils flared. He seemed torn between anger and disbelief. Finally, he growled, "What do you want?" "Amelia. A lavish apartment. Monthly support. Name your price." Amelia swallowed, her voice shaky but resolute. "I don't want a quick payout. I want stability for our child. I want you to fulfill your responsibilities as a father." Bianca snorted. "This is just a money grab." Christopher shot her a glare. "You are a consultant, Miss Rossi. This is a family matter. I advise you to remain silent unless spoken to." The tension in the room escalated to a palpable heat. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Christopher turned to Amelia. "I have some ideas on how to proceed that protect you and the baby. Let's discuss them privately. Ethan, Ms. Rossi. I believe you have other matters to attend to." Ethan looked like he wanted to protest, but Christopher's unyielding stare left no room for argument. Muttering under his breath, Ethan exited, Bianca trailing behind. As they left, Ethan glanced back at Amelia, a complex blend of anger and regret flickering in his eyes. But the moment was fleeting. And so, with Ethan's father by her side, Amelia found herself on the brink of reclaiming her life. The question now was how far Ethan would go to resist the trust's stipulations, and whether she could endure the next phase of this battle without losing herself in the process. Over the next several days, Christopher arranged for Amelia to meet with top financial advisors and attorneys who specialized in family trusts. The Harrington estate felt like a fortress in the midst of a brewing storm, and Amelia found an unexpected ally in the patriarch who once seemed remote and intimidating. Meanwhile, Ethan and Bianca confined themselves to a wing of the estate typically reserved for guests. Gossip buzzed among the household staff about the tension between father and son. Some whispered that Bianca was urging Ethan to contest the trust, or find a loophole that would invalidate Amelia's claim. Others said Ethan had grown suspiciously quiet, possibly realizing just how much he stood to lose. In one particularly frank conversation, Christopher revealed the backstory of the trust. My father Patrick witnessed many tragedies in his life. Siblings who fought over money, relatives who ignored their responsibilities. He wanted to ensure that any future Harrington would never suffer due to greed. That's why he made the trust so ironclad. Christopher sighed. Ethan used to understand this. When he was younger, he was driven, yes, but also kind. I don't know when he lost that compassion. Amelia listened, tears forming in her eyes. She thought back to the early days in the penthouse, to the man who wrote her love notes and made her feel cherished. Maybe he can still find it. She offered weakly, though she wasn't sure she believed her own words. At night, she lay awake in the grand four-poster bed, baby shifting inside her, reminding her of the stakes. Part of her wanted to run away from the entire toxic situation and never look back. But she had to secure her child's future, and the trust gave her the leverage to do so. On the fifth evening, a discreet knock came at her door. To her surprise, it was Ethan alone, looking disheveled. His usual polished facade had cracks. Dark circles lined his eyes. For a moment, Amelia flashed back to the old Ethan, the one who used to earnestly share his dreams with her. "May I come in?" he asked softly. She hesitated, but stepped aside. He entered, glancing around the room. "Could we talk?" His tone was unexpectedly calm, disarming her. Amelia led him to a small sitting area. She perched on the edge of a brocade chair, while Ethan hovered awkwardly. She braced herself for manipulation or anger, but what she saw in his eyes was something different. Regret, maybe even shame. "I never wanted to hurt you," he began, voice barely above a whisper. Things got out of hand. The business deals, the travel, the pressure, it was overwhelming. And Bianca, she made me feel powerful in a way I haven't felt in a long time. Amelia clenched her jaw. "Powerful enough to throw your pregnant wife out onto the street." He winced. I regret that. I was angry and I lashed out. It was cruel. And now, with the trust, I realize what I stand to lose. This estate, my entire inheritance, my reputation. It's all at risk. She studied him, noting the order of his words. Estate inheritance, reputation only. Then, after all, that did he mention the personal cost? Is that your only concern? Your money? His eyes flickered. "No. I'm here because I'm worried about you, about our child. Let's reach an understanding. I can't deal with the stress of a legal battle right now. Let's come to terms, settle this quietly." Amelia felt a surge of disappointment. So it was about a deal, not a genuine apology or reconciliation. And what would your terms be, Ethan? "Look, I'll buy you a comfortable house, set up a generous trust for the child's education, and provide monthly support. In return, you drop any claims on the Harrington family trust. We'll settle everything out of court." His tone was calm, as though discussing a business merger. She inhaled sharply, her hand curling protectively around her belly. "You want me to sign away my legal rights? The rights Christopher and your grandfather wanted me to have. So you can be free to do whatever you want." Ethan met her gaze, but remained silent, his eyes pleading. He reached out to touch her hand, but she pulled away. A wave of conflicting emotions crashed over her heartbreak, anger, nostalgia for what they once shared. Quietly, Amelia stood. "Get out," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm not a business deal. You can't buy our child's security just to protect your empire." Ethan lingered for a moment, eyes searching hers. She wondered if he'd say something heartfelt, something that might spark hope. But he merely nodded, jaw clenched, and retreated from the room, leaving Amelia alone once more in the hushed corridors of the Harrington estate. When she finally sank back onto the bed, tears brimmed in her eyes. She realized the man she'd married was truly gone. All that remained was a millionaire, desperate to salvage his ego and empire. And yet, despite the pain, Amelia felt a steady resolve. She would not betray the trust Christopher had shown her, nor would she abandon her child's rightful claim. The final showdown was inevitable. The morning after Ethan's late-night visit, a storm brewed in the early dawn sky. Thunder rumbled across the estate's rolling hills, a fitting backdrop to the mounting tensions inside. Bianca wasted no time seizing an opportunity to confront Amelia. She cornered her near the estate's library, where Amelia was paging through a parenting guide. "You're using this baby as leverage." Bianca spat, her accent sharpening her words. "It's disgusting." Amelia glanced up, calm despite the fury surging in her. "You have no idea what I've gone through. Don't pretend you're innocent. You helped push me out of my own home." Bianca smirked. "Ethan would have left you eventually. You're not on his level. You never were. This baby is just your golden ticket, isn't it?" Those words struck a nerve. For a moment, Amelia considered unleashing all her anger, but she remembered Christopher's advice to keep her composure. She took a measured breath. "If I wanted gold, I could have stayed in the penthouse pretending everything was fine. But I won't let your greed or Ethan's pride jeopardize my child's future." Bianca bristled, but before she could retort, Christopher's voice echoed from the hallway. "Bianca, a word!" He stood in the doorway, arms folded. With one last glare at Amelia, Bianca clicked her heels out of the library, trailing after Christopher. Amelia closed the parenting guide, her heart hammering. She felt an odd sense of gratitude that Christopher had intervened, even if it wouldn't end Bianca's hostility. That afternoon, the storm finally broke, rain lashing the estate. Amelia sat by a large window, watching lightning fork across the sky. She wondered how she'd ended up here, once deeply in love, now locked in a legal and emotional battle. She whispered a silent prayer for the baby's well-being, determined to keep the child safe no matter what came next. By evening, Frederick Johnson arrived braving the storm to deliver urgent legal papers. "We have confirmation that Ethan's attorneys are preparing a countersuit," he told Amelia as they sat in a study. "They're claiming you abandoned the marital home willingly, and that any request for trust disbursements is an overreach. They also aim to question the paternity of the child." Amelia's stomach churned. Paternity. Ethan knows this is his baby. Frederick sighed. They're using it as leverage. If they can stall the proceedings, they might pressure you into an unfavorable settlement. Tears of rage blurred Amelia's vision. "This is insane. They're willing to smear me like that." Frederick nodded solemnly. "Yes. But don't worry. We'll counter their claims with medical records, witness statements, whatever it takes. You have Christopher and the trust documents on your side." After Frederick left, Amelia paced her sweet adrenaline roaring in her veins. She couldn't fathom how the sweet man she'd married had devolved into someone who would question her integrity and the paternity of their child. The betrayal felt even sharper than the day he'd thrown her out. It was during this restless night that Christopher knocked on her door. The older man looked weary. "May I come in?" She nodded, stepping aside. He sank into an armchair, pressing a hand to his temple. "I'm sorry for the legal circus. I've tried speaking sense to Ethan, but Bianca's influence runs deep. She's convinced him that you're out to destroy him, which is absurd." Amelia's voice wobbled. "He's out to destroy me, Christopher. They're disputing the baby's paternity." "How could he do that?" Christopher's expression darkened. "That's Bianca's handiwork. I know my son isn't heartless enough to deny his own child. I'll do everything I can to intervene. We must stay strong." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating Christopher's tired features. In that moment, Amelia realized he carried a burden almost as heavy as her own, watching his son destroy not only his marriage, but his morality in pursuit of superficial power. She felt a surge of empathy for this man who was once so proud of Ethan's achievements. As the thunder boomed, Christopher rose and placed a comforting hand on Amelia's shoulder. "Have faith, dear. Sometimes, even in the darkest storm, the light finds a way through." He bid her good night. Amelia sat by the window for a long time afterward, her mind swirling with memories both sweet and bitter. She knew the real battle was just beginning, but she also knew she no longer faced it alone. A final reckoning awaited them all. And in that reckoning, a single letter, Christopher's letter, supported by the ironclad trust, might be the key to destroying the illusions Ethan and Bianca had so carefully built. A week later, the long-anticipated court hearing convened in a stately Manhattan courthouse. Rain still slicked the city streets, as though the storm from the estate had followed them. The hearing was preliminary, designed to establish immediate financial support for Amelia and clarify the trust's role. Amelia arrived with Frederick Johnson by her side. She wore a simple black dress that clung to her pregnant belly, a visual reminder of what was truly at stake. Across the aisle, Ethan sat with his high-powered legal team. Bianca perched behind them, her face a mask of cold confidence. The judge, an older woman named Eleanor Pierce, called the session to order. Frederick presented the Harrington Trust documents along with Christopher's addendum. He explained Amelia's circumstances, her forced eviction, her pregnancy, and her need for security. Then came Ethan's turn. His attorneys tried to paint Amelia as a gold digger who refused mediation. They even hinted that the baby might not be Ethan's. Amelia felt her blood boil at the suggestion, but she steeled herself, trusting Frederick to counter. It was Christopher's testimony that proved decisive. When the judge invited him to speak, he rose clear-eyed despite his evident exhaustion. "My father established this trust to ensure no legitimate heir to the Harrington name would suffer due to negligence or greed," Christopher said firmly. "Amelia is my daughter-in-law. She's carrying my grandchild. I've personally witnessed Ethan's recent behavior and can testify that Amelia has been unjustly cast aside. The trust is clear: if Ethan fails to care for his spouse and child, the estate can and will intervene." Ethan's lead attorney shifted uncomfortably, but Bianca visibly bristled. Amelia watched Ethan for any sign of remorse. He stared at the floor, jaw clenched, refusing to meet her gaze. Judge Pierce asked pointed questions. "Harrington, you've heard your father's statement. Are you prepared to contest the validity of your own grandfather's trust?" Ethan stood buttoning his suit jacket. I respect my family's legacy. Your Honor, however, there have been misunderstandings. My wife left the marital home of her own accord, and Judge Pierce raised an eyebrow. "According to the affidavits, you told her to leave if she couldn't accept your new living arrangements. So is it correct to say that she wasn't merely leaving of her own free will, but acting on your demands?" Ethan faltered. "Yes, but it wasn't meant to be permanent." The judge's eyes narrowed. "That's not how it appears. Nor does the rumor you're questioning the paternity of this child. It seems you're pulling every trick to avoid your responsibilities." Bianca looked like she wanted to speak, but Ethan's attorney motioned for her to remain silent. At that moment, Amelia felt an odd sense of pity for Ethan. He was cornered, forced to defend indefensible actions, all because he refused to let go of his pride. After reviewing the evidence and arguments, Judge Pierce ruled for an immediate support order. Ethan was mandated to provide Amelia with a monthly stipend and secure housing if Amelia wished to live outside the Harrington estate. The paternity matter was dismissed as a baseless claim subject to a simple test if needed. The judge also recognized Christopher's right to enforce the trust, signaling that a more expansive financial arrangement could follow if Ethan didn't comply. As the gavel struck, a wave of relief washed over Amelia. She had won the first battle. The court had acknowledged the validity of the trust and her right to support. Ethan stormed out, flanked by his attorneys, while Bianca sent Amelia a venomous look before trailing after him. Christopher approached, gently touching Amelia's shoulder. That went as well as it could have. She nodded, tears forming. "I'm just glad the court saw the truth." Despite this small victory, Amelia knew the war was not over. Ethan's empire was vast, and so was his pride. But the single letter from Christopher, the trust documents, and her unwavering determination had shattered the impenetrable facade of the millionaire who thought he was untouchable. Now she had a chance to build a life for herself and her child, free from the nightmares of sleeping in a car and from the tyranny of a love grown toxic. And so in the grand showdown that pitted true family values against reckless ambition, it was a single letter, backed by an ironclad trust, that brought the mighty crashing down. Amelia stood firm, protecting her unborn child and claiming the security and dignity she deserved. Ethan, blinded by his own success, nearly lost everything in his quest for power and validation. Yet in the end, justice prevailed. Thank you for watching this dramatic saga unfold from the car, where Amelia first sheltered her unborn baby, to the gilded halls of a family estate where one letter rewrote her fate. If you found yourself holding your breath at every twist and turn, please like this video. Share it with friends who love real-life dramas, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove no empire is untouchable when truth and determination stand at the door. Your support helps us bring you more compelling tales every week.